guys, how's it going? And welcome to the Rebel Pastor YouTube channel. Pastor Sky, I am over here in South Korea right now, and yes, I am recording once again from my bedroom. Hope you guys have enjoyed your amazing and awesome week. If it is your first time here, or if you haven't yet, go ahead, subscribe, like, comment, hit that notification bell, and if you really like this content and you think your friends or family would benefit from it, go ahead and share this content with them too. We are on the path and on the road to 10,000 subscribers. Big thank you for all the people that are praying for this channel, and I hope and I know that when God answers this prayer, we're not going to just hit 10,000, but we're going to go where God leads us with all the things that we're doing here and all the people we're reaching out to too. If you want to support this channel, go ahead. If you look in the description below, we do have buymeacoffee.com, and you can support me one coffee at a time. And if you guys know me, I am a very huge coffee enthusiast, and one of the things I'm super excited about is a friend of mine is coming over from the States, and he's bringing me a brand new coffee grinder. So super excited about this. All right, so today we're going to go into part 2 of how to study the Bible properly. And we talked about this last week in part 1. And you know, one of the biggest things that people shouldn't do is just think that the Bible is so easy to understand and read, and they just think to themselves, oh, it's just a literal book, meaning every single part of it, just read it and it is what it is. But what we know when we start reading the Bible is clearly there are some parts that are symbolic, right? And of course, there are other parts too that we may think are very, very easy to understand, but it does require information, background, context, and interpretation. So, you know, when we're trying to study the Bible, we're not just trying to figure out what the word itself says. We're trying to figure out the purpose and meaning of what the Bible is trying to say. And this is why for all of us here, when it comes to us understanding the Bible and understanding God, we need to study the Bible really well. Now, one thing I do want to tell you, I'll just share a couple of verses with you, is if the Bible was all literal, then Jesus wouldn't say things like Matthew chapter 13, verse 34 and 35. He says, Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet, right? So even when you read the rest of the verse, basically, verse 35 is saying that it was prophesied that Jesus would come speak symbolically in parables, right? Is I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world, okay? So here's Jesus himself saying, yeah, no, I don't just speak in parables. I didn't use anything without using a parable, and I fulfilled the prophecy. Now, the second verse is very interesting because it's Hosea chapter 12, verse 10. And this talks about the Old Testament prophets, and what God says to Hosea is, I spoke to the prophets, gave them many visions, and told parables through them. Once again, even in the Old Testament, here is God saying that when I gave visions and dreams and all these things to the prophets, a lot of it was parables. It was symbolic, all right? So last week, I gave you tip number 1, and the first thing I said is when you start to study the Bible, simply speaking, just start asking a lot of questions, right? We're not doing it to discount the Bible. We're not asking questions to say that the Bible is wrong. We're trying to figure out, oh, where is it false? We're asking questions because we're curious. We're asking questions to be inquisitive, to seek what God is really trying to say to us, right? So I gave you the example last week, and it's Joshua chapter 10, verses 12 through 14, okay? And what it says is, on the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, sun stand still over Gibeon, and you moon over the valley of Aijalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel, right? So when Joshua prayed for the sun to stop, right, think about this. If we take this literally, the Bible says the sun stopped, which is also assumption saying that the sun is moving, because you can't stop something if it's not moving. But we all know this is completely untrue. It's the earth that moves around the sun. And that's why in this case, what question should you ask is, does the sun even move? But we know is, and we've learned this from elementary school, it doesn't move. So in this case, it's great. It's a great question. It helps us to go deeper into the scriptures and what it's actually trying to say, right? So question, that's number one. So let's get into tip number two, right? The second tip on studying the Bible. Okay, so let's go back into the exact same story of Joshua asking for the sun to stop. So we're going to get into this for even next week's tip also. The next thing we want to do is not just ask questions, but we should also look for evidence. Now, what does this mean? Of course, I know this, guys, we're not going to be able to find evidence for every single thing in the Bible, or every question we ask is not going to have evidence. We understand that. But we should search for some type of evidence to help us understand the scriptures a lot better. So there are two types of evidence that we're going to find. The first type of evidence is what you'd call like real evidence, something scientific, something historic. We'll find it in some history books, like proving that the Bible is true, or something scientific that shows, yeah, this is something that actually happened. But the second type of evidence is a little bit more difficult, but all it requires is this one thing that every human being has, and that's called common sense. The first type of evidence is real evidence, like scientific and historic. The second evidence is what you call assumed. What does it mean, assumed? It means that it is something you can assume because it's something that anyone with common sense would understand, okay? So let's get into that for this story of Joshua and the sun stopping. So in this case, Joshua asks for the sun to stop, okay? So let's ask another question with an assumption, okay? An assumption, an evidence that comes from assumption. Let's assume first. The sun stopped for an entire day. So most people are going to say, oh my gosh, this is a miracle of God. God stopped the sun for an entire day. Okay, so we're assuming that, yes, the sun actually stopped for an entire day, 24 hours. Okay? And as people of faith, we shouldn't doubt. We shouldn't go against the Bible. And as believers, we believe the Bible is true. So, in this story, let's think about evidence. What kind of evidence can we assume by common sense in this case? Is there any type of, like, when you look at real evidence, is there anything out there about this story, about the sun stopping 3,500 years ago? This is a 3,500-year-old story. We don't really have much on it when it comes to real evidence. It's just too old and we don't see enough of it. And there doesn't seem to be anyone who wrote it historically or anything scientific, or science would completely go against it, right? However, this is something you have to think about, the second type of evidence, which is assumed by common sense. We don't need that real type of evidence. Sometimes we just need common sense. Now, what does that mean? Okay? It means that if the sun stopped for an entire day, 24 hours, what kind of evidence can I assume? Right? Shouldn't there be some type of evidence? And the answer is true, right? Think about this. If the sun stopped for 24 hours, it means that it didn't stop for just Israel. It didn't stop for just this battle. If the sun stopped, it stops for the entire world, which means the whole world altogether should have experienced it, right? Common sense tells us that if the sun literally stopped for 24 hours, don't you think other civilizations would have noticed something? Especially Egypt. Think about Egypt, guys. Egypt worshiped the sun god. You don't think that they would write this down, or they would even notice that on the sundial, the sun stopped moving for 24 hours. You don't think that they'd write this down? Now, take it. If a sun stopped for 10 minutes, you can miss it. If it stopped for 30 minutes, yeah, you could probably miss it. In an hour, you might miss that too. But when would it get to a point where everyone would be like, no, there's something different. There's something going on here. At what time? At 3 hours? If the sun stopped for 3 hours, would you notice? 5, 8, 10? Don't you think by the time it hits like 7, 8 hours, everyone's going to be like, there's something weird going on right now? And common sense also tells us that if the sun stopped, then on the other side of the world, what should other civilizations be writing about? Why is it still dark for an extra 24 hours? Common sense evidence is also something that we can think about. If the sun stopped for 24 hours, you don't think that any other civilization would have noticed? I think many or at least one, especially a civilization that worships the sun, they would have written some account about it. It's not any different from if you think about Noah's flood too. One of the things that we can think about that is common sense evidence that is if the whole world was flooded and everyone died, then there should be a gap in history in every civilization around the world at that same time. Why? Because no one would be living to write it down. They should all be dead. However, right, when you look at all the history of civilizations around the world, and especially pre-biblical civilizations like the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Phoenicians, the Babylonians, these are pre-biblical, which means they were around before the Bible. And they were the ones they were there when Noah's flood was said to have happened. And if the flood killed everyone in the world, then in ancient Sumeria, the Phoenicians, the Babylonians, Egyptians, at the same time, everyone should have a gap of no one writing history. But that's not true, right? And what I'm saying to you is I'm not here to say that, oh no, the Bible is wrong. No, I'm saying that this is part of Bible study. It's not to say the Bible is wrong. It's not to say it's untrue. It's for us to study. I'm a pastor, guys. I'm not here to say the Bible is wrong. But too many people are not informed or they don't study the Bible enough to really understand. And that's why today's tip for you guys is what? Is find evidence, whether real, which is scientific or historic, or assumed, which is more has to do with common sense that everyone would agree with, that if the sun stopped for 24 hours, don't you think that some civilization around the world would have noticed it and wrote it down? And the answer is, yeah, that is normal common sense. And this is going to be the second tip for you guys so that when you read the Bible, you can study it really well. And of course, when it comes to next week, I'll give you the third tip. I'm also going to go over the exact same story of Joshua and the sun stopping so that you guys can get a better idea of, I should be studying it like this. Oh, this makes more sense to me, right? So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's tip number 2, finding evidence. And if you have any questions or any comments below, would love to hear from you guys. And like I said, guys, I'm not here to discount or disprove the Bible. That's not my point. It's more about we need to study it more. We need to understand it a lot better too. Okay? So thank you so much, guys, for joining today. Have an amazing and awesome week. And we'll see you guys. This is Pastor Sky signing off on the Rebel Pastor Podcast. Have an amazing week and see you again. All right? Take care. Bye-bye.
Rebel, never settle, I raise the level. It's time to go, sky's the limit, it's me against the world. Rebel pastor,